once again, Dayton, thank you for joining us here at the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. I'm your host, Spike Spengel. Tim, how are you this week?
Doing well, Spike.
Fantastic. This is a great series. I love this stretch of what you're doing right now with the programs. We are doing a 3-program series on retirement planning, specifically retirement plans, all of that alphabet soup, the 401k, the 403b, the TSPs, the SEPs and the simples, and as I say, not really that simple. And I'm asking you how it's been going for folks, how are they doing with retirement planning, just generally speaking right now. When people are kicked off into a retirement plan, for instance, if you're a government employee, you're handed the TSP. You have to go and figure out the fund choices. Do people tend to veer more towards conservative, a little over-aggressive, or just unsure? How are people doing with their own asset allocation as far as you see it from your seat?
Well, you know, I think unfortunately, what you said is exactly right. It's handed off to them. And so there is today a lot of information. There's the ability to do research on your own. And even in a lot of the planning sites with your 401k and that type of thing, they actually have educational videos and information. I think for the most part, people are doing okay. Where I find the disconnect is if I ask somebody, you know, about risk, for example, and I say, you know, well, where are you in the world of risk? How comfortable are you? And we've talked about this before. It's kind of an arbitrary thing, the word risk. It's like me saying the word car. You know, there's Ferraris and there's Yugos and
there's motorcycles and buses and everything in between. You know,
correct. So, you know, a lot of times where I'm seeing the disconnect is that the level of risk somebody says they feel comfortable with doesn't match what they actually own. Now they think it does, and that's kind of how they made their choices, but it really depends on where they got their advice from. Did they get it from a coworker or from a parent or a friend, or did they get it from somebody that's maybe, you know, a more seasoned professional in that industry? And
folks, just to, because I haven't said this in maybe a couple of programs here, Tim, of course, focuses on retirement planning strategies, making sure that viewers like yourselves actually get to and through their retirement. He likes to help put together retirement plans, specifically the retirement blueprint for you, to make sure that you can be and stay retired. And like we said, during this 3-show series, we're talking about the retirement plans themselves, because this is what you see every single day in the offices. You're not just a handsome-looking broadcaster out here talking about retirement strategy. You help people every day in the offices take a look at these things. And so here's one thing. I'll bet you everybody wants to know this so they can turn off the channel, go someplace else. They just want to know the answer to one question. How much are they going to need to retire? Is that a simple question?
If I walk you through the calculation, you will probably say no. So the best example of figuring out your number was, you remember the old ING commercial? Where they walked around with their number under their arm? That was such a great commercial because people got it, right? I mean, it's like, you know, they're carrying around, you know, $1.5 million, and maybe they didn't know exactly what that means, but it was a concrete way to see, I need to know what that number is. And so, you know, I don't know how much time you want to spend on talking about this, but the answer is this. How much am I going to need in retirement is the question that we ask. And a lot of times people are able to put their finger on that number. And we usually start with, in today's dollars, if you were to retire today and you have the things paid off, like, you know, a lot of times someone will say, well, I want my mortgage paid for, and we want the cars paid off, and I don't want any debt. What do you need on a monthly basis to do what you want to do? Now, I also have to put the caveat out there to enjoy retirement, because a lot of times I'll get the answer back, well, Tim, we could survive on, or we could get by on, and that's not the purpose of retirement. I'm not working my whole working career to survive.
To sit in the same house, the same clothes, and the same car, and hope that I don't run out of money. That's not a lifestyle choice. That's holding on for dear life. You just said something in there. I'm going to pause you right away because we have to go a lot more into numbers. So we're going to stay. How much do you need to be and stay retired? But you just said something in there I don't completely agree with.
Okay.
The cars. Say, we're going to pay off the cars. Look, Tim, we could be in retirement for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Don't you think eventually we might need at least one new vehicle? What are new vehicles costing us today?
No, you're exactly right, Spike. And I think it's more of that comfort level of not having debt, but you're exactly right. Those debts are going to continue to happen. We're still going to buy a new car, and a lot of times today, leasing makes more sense than buying. If you look at the price of used cars right now, they've skyrocketed. So why am I going to buy a new car when I could simply lease one?
Right, and especially because of the technological advances. The more computers and gadgets that we have to help you with driving. We were just looking at that for my mom, all the beeps and buzzers on the side to let her know when there's oncoming traffic. I like those features, especially for someone who's older and driving. But just the safety technology, yeah, maybe leasing is. And is that something that you can talk about, or you can go to your financial advisor and say, hey, should I buy or lease a car? Because I thought you just talked to your financial advisor about investments.
Yeah, and so everybody's different. One of the things that we've done with creating the retirement blueprint is to literally handle everything that somebody goes through with retirement planning.
Wow.
So estate planning, tax planning, wealth management, looking at long-term care, Social Security, Medicare, and where should I go to get new tires on my car? You wouldn't believe the number of widows. I mean, if you think about this, so husband passes away, right? Husband always got the tires, and all of a sudden husband's not there anymore, and wife is like, I don't know where to go to get tires. And so we actually have a couple people that we know where we can say, hey, Mrs. Smith is coming down to see you, take care of her.
Yeah.
And those are the types of things.
You're a resource, no matter what the dollar sign is.
Travel, new tires on the car, retirement planning, we do it all.
A part of having a financial advisory service. Tim, we're going to have to take a very short break. Folks, the idea of having a retirement blueprint is making sure that you've got all of your bases covered. Yes, of course, the investment strategy is incredibly important. You want to make sure that you are being efficient, as well as taking a look at your taxes and being efficient. But also, as Tim was just saying, making sure that you have a legacy plan in place, meaning, are you leaving your money to anyone? Do you have a health care plan in place for long-term care needs down the road? All of that is the retirement blueprint and the retirement blueprint process. And if these are some of the things that are on your mind that are keeping you up at night because you don't have an actual strategy, do yourself a favor. Call the phone number you see right here. Tim and his team will start a complimentary review on all of those investment challenges in retirement. But you need to reach out to us here, 855-684-3485. We're going to continue to talk about retirement planning strategies when we get back right after this.
We're passionate about making sure our clients live stress-free in retirement. We do that with the Retirement Blueprint. It's our trademark planning process designed to help you navigate to and through retirement. When you're nearing retirement, it's essential that you have a written plan and know exactly how that plan will work for you. Let us show you how 27 years of experience can make a difference in your plan.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. I'm your host, Spike Spengel, and this is a 3-show series that we are running all the way throughout this year on retirement planning strategies. Of course, Tim always focuses on retirement planning, but these 3 shows are about how investments are working out for you inside those retirement accounts. What kinds of things do you need to do to save and to be properly saved to get yourself all the way through retirement? And this is a similar question, and you and I were talking about this pre-show. It's how much will I need in retirement, but how much will I need to save to get there? That question, I know, is very different for everyone because we have different salaries, we're different ages, we work in different industries. So you can't even simply on this show say how much you need to save to get there because it's different for every family. So where do you start with that? How do you unpack the numbers?
Well, to know how much you need to save, you have to know where you're going, right? And so the answer is somewhat of a math equation, but we start with understanding, like we were saying earlier before we went to break, you need to know how much you're going to need to live in retirement. And so what is my annual need? And so let's just make up some numbers for the folks at home so they can kind of get an idea of how this works. And so let's say it's $60,000 a year. And so we look at the first thing and say, all right, we need $60,000 a year, and we're going to retire in 20 years. Well, I know with simple inflation that my $60,000 need in today's dollars is going to be $120,000 in 20 years.
Okay.
So now I no longer need 60, I need 120. But we get to subtract our pension, and so we'll say that there's going to be a $50,000 pension, and we get to subtract Social Security, and we'll say there's $30,000 there of Social Security. Yeah. So 80,000 of our 120 is kind of taken care of, and so that leaves us with a $40,000 difference. And so that's the number that we've got to figure out. And so I know that basically $40,000, we would need about $1 million to produce $40,000 of income. And so that's how we get to your question 2, which is how much do I need to save? Well, how much do I have saved currently? How is that going to grow? That's going to give us that monthly savings number. As you can see, there's a lot there that companies have basically said, hey, here's a 401k, figure it out.
Yeah. Now, you just brought up something, though, that I think is probably vastly overlooked, including myself. So I was hoping that the viewers picked up on it. You said taking into account inflation, and you went from 60,000 to 120,000. So wait a second, what was his math? Let's do that again, the inflationary part. I think, obviously, in today's times, we're a lot more aware of inflation than we ever have been. Inflation nearing almost double digits, high single digits throughout the year here. So normally people had taken account maybe 2 or 3% for inflation, but the cost of goods and our monthly cost is actually doubling at a much higher rate right now. So are you changing your inflation projections as you're doing retirement planning today, or are you hoping and thinking that eventually it's going to come down a bit?
No, I mean, we're looking at long-term trends. And so if I were to use today's numbers, I think that would give us a real skewed result.
Okay.
Much like a 3% number for a lot of years over the last decade would have been way too high. And so we're looking at that average, and I think, listen, it's a guess. It is. I mean, I know people don't want to say that, but it's a guess. I've got a neighbor that's a doctor, and he says the same thing. He's like, sometimes we're just guessing. We think it's this, but we don't know for sure. We use 3% because I think it's a good number. It's a good 100-year average number. But today, you're right. It's much higher than that.
Right. Now, these are some of the things that you're considering. So we've got inflation. We've got, as we've talked about on other programs, the funds that we're choosing, how much risk and how we identify risk. And I think what I'm trying to point out for the viewer is that retirement planning today is so much different than it was for our parents or especially our grandparents. We're not getting those pension plans. You firmly believe that Social Security in some form will be there a decade from now, but there could be adjustments depending on what and you say income. When you say income in retirement, we're talking about those required minimum distributions, the Social Security, and the money that we're taking out from those retirement accounts. So that's considered your income. Right. There's another factor that's in there that we haven't quite talked about. Let's spend a little bit of time on it right now, taxes. I don't think you think taxes are going to go down, do you?
No, I don't think taxes are going to go down. And so, and I'm glad you brought that up, Spike. So, we did all that math when we came up with our $120,000 and we needed to generate this 40 grand of income. And I used the number of $1 million would generate 40,000. What I didn't do until you just now mentioned it was how much do I actually have to take out of my IRA, my 401k, my retirement savings plan to net $40,000, right?
Yeah.
And so, I've had multiple clients that we've sat down with, and this happens a lot, of saying, you know what, I've saved $1 million, I can generate $40,000 a year of income, that's exactly what I need, I'm good. And all of a sudden the check comes and it's not $40,000, right? It's
36, 32,
yeah,
30.
28, 29,000, because they had to pay taxes because it was tax deferred. That money has been growing without tax, but when we take it out from under the umbrella, the tax rain hits it, right?
Yeah.
And so what they're walking away with is a smaller number, and that has to be factored into that savings calculation. So maybe it's not $1 million, maybe it's $1.3 million, $1.4 million, to account for those additional costs with the taxes.
Right. Now, I've had this question before. I took this from a live event that I did recently, and I think there's a little bit of a misconception with the 401k as compared to a pension plan. I had been asked, what happens to my 401k if I pass away before retirement? Your 401k isn't something that vanishes. A pension is something that could go away. Or your spouse might receive 25 or 50% of what it was. Can you explain a little bit of that for the folks? So you've got your 401ks, but you have your state plans and your government plans. They're all different, and I think sometimes it gets a little confusing.
They are all different, and I mean, this is really where, for the viewers at home, if you're in OPRS, if you're in TSP, if you're in a 401k, or you have a company that has a pension plan, you're responsible for knowing what the rules are. And we talk about all the time, if a husband and wife live to be 100 and pass away in bed, they don't have any problems. They don't. I mean, everything typically works out. Where things go off the rails is when something happens to somebody early, and this is a great question that you're bringing up, because I have this pension plan, and it says, if I work 30 years, I'm going to get this lifetime income. What happens if I die 28 years in?
Yeah. Yeah.
For the viewers at home, do you know the answer to that question? Does your pension have any kind of guarantee if you
for your spouse?
predecease?
Yeah. Because you might be saying to your spouse, "Don't worry, honey, we're covered. We're going to have my pension all the way throughout, and then when I pass away, maybe I'll make an election. You'll be able to receive 50% or 75%."
But what if I don't get there? Exactly. What if I don't actually get to my pension? Because they're all different. And so knowing the answer to that is very important, because if I'm counting on, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 a year of income from a pension that all of a sudden I don't get to, once I get there, it's going to pay.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there is an opportunity to add a spouse on there for a reduced, and that's important, a reduced pension benefit. But even then, you're still talking about, if you pass away and you're the pension person, a 50% reduction in income needs to be accounted for in your plan. You have to have an idea of, if that money goes away, how am I going to replace it? And the answer is not, Spike, well, she'll spend less money or he'll spend less money.
Because as you were just saying a few minutes ago, we also have inflation, which means our cost of goods and services doubles over. And you were giving the conservative number, we could say 12 or 15 or even 20 years, but if you're in retirement for a long time, our costs are going to go up. And whether you want to buy a new car or not, let's say maybe we're not driving as much, because even as we get older, we could take Uber and so forth, but you still might need that roof repair. We're still going to have higher medical costs, so please don't assume that just because a spouse passes away that you'll be able to spend less. You might actually be spending more. We're going to continue going through these retirement planning strategies when we get back after the break. Folks, if what we're talking about here, though, is resonating with you, if you're worried about if your funds are going to last, whether you have a pension or not, whether you have a retirement plan such as a 401k or a 403b, or if you're worried how all of this is going to work together with your Social Security, and if you have a long-term care strategy, you don't have to do it alone. Call Tim right here, 855-684-3485, so he can help put together your own retirement blueprint. We're going to take a very short break, and we'll continue talking about retirement planning strategies right after this.
Retirement is about choosing where you want to go and mapping out a plan to get there. That's why I created the Retirement Blueprint. Of course, things don't always go according to plan. Come learn how our team can help you avoid potential hazards and find alternate routes. We're here to do life with you and share your journey. Let us blueprint your life to keep you on track to make sure you get the most out of retirement. Are you on the road to success? Call us today for a complimentary review to find out. Let us plan your tomorrow today.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. I'm your host, Spike Spengel, and we're going through a 3-show series about your retirement plans, those 401ks, those 403bs, those 457s, those TSPs. I made that rhyme.
That rhymed.
I didn't even, I swear, I didn't try. I was just like, what else do I have left in the brain here? So let's assume that we've done a little bit of our planning before retirement. Sometimes we'll call it the retirement red zone, that 5 years, that 3 years, that 1 year before retirement. As we get really, really close, you definitely want to sit down and talk with a retirement planning specialist, such as yourself. But now what? Let's say we hit that goal line, and we've got that 401k. It's done well for us. We've got maybe $500,000 or $600,000 in there. I think one of my first questions is, what do I do with that now? Do I leave it at the employer? Do I roll this over, I guess, into my own IRA, and now what? Now I'm in charge of it? I think for a lot of folks, at least for the first few months, they're thinking, I'm just going to leave it there. It's grown really well. It's done really well. I'll let the employer keep taking care of it. What do you think when you see that? What should people be doing when they get right to that retirement?
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all answer to that question, Spike. I mean, let me give you the reasons why people say they aren't going to roll it over. One misconception is that my cost would go up if I made a change.
Right. Well, that's my first thought right there. I roll it out. My employer must be keeping the cost down on this.
Right.
No, I'm going to leave it where it is.
Yeah, so that's the first misconception. And it's not always wrong. For example, the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan that the government has, they're all in index funds. So it doesn't get any cheaper than that because nobody's managing the money for you. And so it is extremely expensive. Now the flip side is
inexpensive.
Inexpensive, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And so if you transferred it out to Vanguard S&P 500 fund, it's going to be cheap. I mean, because there's no management going on. The question is that meeting your goal? And so based on your age, based on, for example, if I have to take income from my 401k, how much risk do I want associated with that? Mm-hmm. And so when you start looking at that and you start looking at the cost may not be the decision maker. The other reason why a lot of times people leave it there is that they have this sense of security of, well, if my company picked, a company to work with, then they vetted them and they must be a good fit.
Okay, exactly. I mean, that's the thing that's in the back of my head, and I'm absolutely certain that millions of Americans feel the same way. It's almost a kind of it's a version of affinity. We talk about it, people doing seminars at churches and places of worship and so forth, and say we should separate that because there's an automatic assumption. Oh, well, if it's being presented here, then it must be okay because my employer approved it.
Right. So is the relationship with a corporation or is your relationship with an advisor? Is the corporation giving you advice or do you have an actual individual person that's advising you? And I think that's just a misconception that a lot of times we see. In the accumulation phase, when people are saving, they don't need as much interaction. When you enter retirement, you just became the CEO of your retirement corporation. Yeah. You're in charge.
And so, if you're married, you're in charge of your spouse's funds and both of your lifestyles now.
And if you have the background for that, have at it, right? But if that's not your area of expertise, having advice given to you by a team of people or at least an individual that does that for a living, if the cost is very similar, I think that people are missing out if they don't take advantage of that.
Right, right. And there's just one more element that I think sometimes people forget. They say, look at how well my funds did. Look at how much I've grown. Well, you've been saving periodically, probably every pay period. You're also getting that match. And I think that, I don't know, I don't want to use the word deceives, but I think it just tricks our mind, thinking, well, look at the performance of this. When really, you've been adding over a 14-year bull run along with an employer match. How can somebody do a comparison and actually look at the performance, if you will, of those retirement accounts, as opposed to knowing what's on the outside? Are you supposed to performance evaluate your retirement account?
Spike, I love this question. That is such a great point. So I have heard this over and over again of, you know what, things are pretty bad out there, but I didn't go down that much. It's like, well, you just had $30,000 of contributions this year between your, the money you put in, the money your wife put in, and employee contributions and employer matches. And so that acts as a very big buffer, and that you used that word, and that's a very accurate, it almost acts as an airbag to kind of trick you into thinking that it's doing better than it is. Additionally, when things are going up, plus you're putting money in it, of course it's growing faster. That realization happens when that stops.
Wow, I'm not working, but this fund doesn't seem to be performing as well as it has the last couple of years. Now, Tim, I wanted to give you about a minute. We've got just a little bit of time left. Could you explain, though, to folks what you will actually do in a complimentary review? We talk about this stuff because you like to be educational. But in the office, if somebody calls the phone number, what can you do for them when it comes to these retirement plans?
Listen, everybody has needs, and they have things that they're trying to figure out. How much do I need to save to get to retirement? How much do I need to have when I get to retirement? How do I not run out of money? What about my estate plan and my tax plan and Medicare and all of the things in between? If these are things that are bouncing around in your mind right now, if these are questions that you don't have answers to, we created the retirement blueprint for that exact purpose, to build you a roadmap to help you navigate to and through retirement. And that's what we would do for you in a complimentary review.
Tim, thank you so much for today's program. We will continue our 3-show series on retirement planning. For you to get your own complimentary review, call us right here, 855-684-3485. We'll be back with more Retirement Blueprint and Tim Lofton once again next week.